Hello to everyone who has joined us for this fun discussion 25 years in the making. My name is Derek DeWinter, and for the next 20 to 25 minutes, you get to listen into the strategy, the whimsy, fits and starts, occasional failures, and amazing success of DeWinter. We'll be talking about our early days in August of 2000 to present day, and a bunch of mile markers along the way. And joining me is my friend, co-founder, and OG, Mike Tomasello.
Thanks for the introduction, Derek. Hello, everybody. I hope this is a fun trip in the Wayback Machine and brings back a few great memories.
It no doubt will. So, Mike, let's go back on the Wayback Time Machine. And why don't you share your version, PC, of course, how we met and how this journey began?
Sure. I actually remember this pretty vividly. I had been convinced to interview for a recruiting gig by our old firm that had placed my wife in a role out of Deloitte and Touche back then. I was a little reluctant because corporate accounting was kind of eating me up. I wasn't super excited about continuing my career there. During the final stages of the interview process with the firm, I drove down to meet our boss in San Jose and you, Derek. So we chatted for 15 minutes and you suggested we get a beer, and that was that.
Pretty rigorous interviews process.
Yep.
So this is way back in our 20s. We worked together for 6 years at another firm. And after that, we kind of collect ourselves and forge blindly into the unknown of starting our own business. Give me your recollection of the things we talked about, our ambitions for the firm, a North Star, or exactly why we were going to do what we were going to do.
When we started, I want to give a little bit of credit to our former boss, Monty Parker. He was the original Parker of Parker and Lynch that was obviously acquired that we know about. He really believed in treating people well, more importantly to closing a deal. And I think that really stuck with us. After the acquisition of Parker and Lynch, we hung around for 3 years and we felt that we had the opportunity to start our own firm. We learned about integrity and being really good to people. And we wanted to make sure that we sustained that in our new firm because we found it to be very rewarding. When we started, I was in my early 30s. My son was doing a month. He just turns 25 in October, which is wild. And we had just bought a house. So it was a little stressful, but I felt ignorantly confident.
I think it's probably a good way to do a lot of things. I remember starting conversations about it, spending a lot of time on like the name and fonts and colors and, the way things were going to look, where the office might be, the walls. I remember one of the walls that we put sand in the paint because we thought it would be cool to have a textured wall. What furniture and computers and stuff we could have, and actually some of the stuff that we could actually afford. And at the time, it was literally like the most important thing in the world. And, as you kind of look back on the things that you spent a ton of time just grinding over, none of it was really important in retrospect. And, I also don't really remember planting a stake in the ground and declaring, we shall be the greatest firm on earth, or anything like that. I think we simply wanted to be the best at what we did. And, over the years, I think very simply, we've translated that into kind of a maniacal focus on being the best at everything we touch. But in the early days, it was, I'd hate to admit it was kind of about some of the silly stuff we thought at the time was important.
Yeah. There's always apprehension in starting a business. The best thing you could do is, put your head down and work hard. We did that. We found people like Don Seeley who could join us and further our mission, which was, treating everybody with integrity and treating people well. We thought that would continue, obviously, as we grew the firm.
But
right.
So early years, like there's always some sort of weird memory or takeaway. What is one of those things that you think about often enough that puts a smile on your face today?
Our first office was off the Alameda at the Alameda complex there. And it was this quiet little office park with a stream going through it. And we had, I think, 500 square feet. We had a guy who did the services there. His name was Rock, and he thought we were just ridiculous. We had a deli downstairs. We were across the street from the original Luna restaurant. Our internet was through data lines, no Wi-Fi, no cloud. Some of the funnier instances was we had a golf club in there, and, while you're on the phone, you're kind of swinging it while you're talking to people. And Don lost his grip. It flew and broke one of our windows, which Rock appreciated. I vividly remember talking to a CFO who I really respected, and I finally got him on the phone, and I was leaning back in my chair, and I literally fell backwards in my chair, completely crushed the trash can, and just kept on talking while I laid on the floor. When I got off the call, you were like, what the hell are you doing? But we laughed about that for a while.
Do you remember Rock's last name?
Oh, Hollywood.
Broadway.
Rock Broadway.
We tried to steal his shirt.
We did steal his shirt, and he got mad at us.
Yeah, it's funny. Like in the last several years, I moved my three kids into dorm rooms at Wisconsin and Miami recently for my youngest, which means you're kind of carrying things you shouldn't for move-in days, scrounging for tools, sitting on the ground, putting together a shoe rack or raising a bed, and inevitably finishing the day with a beer and a few Advil. We did a lot of that when we first moved in the office. It was, carrying things upstairs, assembling, all of our computer stuff. It's going to buy a huge wooden credenza at a garage sale and strapping that in the back of my convertible Mustang. That thing was enormous. We had to cut a hole in the back of it to get ventilation for the hardware that we had, where we had our database on and all that type of stuff. Whatever. I remember falling asleep with my head on my desk. And that was after having my twins, Jake and Maya, and not sleeping a whole lot for several months. I do remember falling asleep with my head on those old wooden desks. And if I'm lying.
It was crazy. I mean, you got to remember our budget, which was not much. We were buying things on the cheap. We were going to wholesale places to buy essentially furniture for the home. We had beanbag chairs and desks that were functionally terrible. But our true genius was our Access database. This was before cloud servers. And so to share a database in two locations, you needed to upload it on tape to a server, which sent the info overnight on a phone line. That's like riding a horse to the moon nowadays. It was crazy.
Nay. What did you ever have moments where you're like, oh my God, is this going to work?
Our timing was not fantastic. We started at the end of 2000 and we kind of rolled into the dot-com bust in the second half of 2000, the first half of 2001. And then we unfortunately had 9/11. So there were a lot of big instances that were happening. I vividly remember where I was on 9/11. I was at a company called Blue Martini with a client, Dave Bernstein. We were just like, what is going on? I remember actually going to your house and it was almost like this feeling of disbelief. But I will say that in the aftermath, we refocused and tried to stay as positive as possible. And we seemed to weather that pretty well. It helped that we were small at the time. Similarly, during the financial crisis, I had real concerns because that was a systemic issue in the economy. And I think everybody felt that. It was a little bit different than the dot-com bust, but those were probably the big ones that concerned me most.
Yeah, I never really had a doubt about us. And I think we were obviously good friends at the time, which actually, if you want to stress a friendship, start a business. But I never really had a doubt about us. I knew we were kind of foundationally approaching this in the right way, very thoughtfully as we could, relationship centric, doing it in an amazing marketplace. Obviously, the Bay Area is as good as you're going to get. But, I had moments where I wondered about the impact of things happening around us, like you talked about, the things that we could not control, the things you could never have seen coming, but always do. It's funny, we've had lots of different things go on here, whether it's COVID or Gulf War, the financial crisis. My more vivid memory of something external that was just a massive, crazy gut punch was 9/11. I remember getting up early to go to San Francisco, getting dressed. It's like 6 a.m. or something. And then the world stopped. I actually had forgotten came over that day. That's funny.
Were there any specific moments or events that made you feel like we were definitely over the hump and this was sustainable?
Well, in the start, everything is kind of new and exciting. The color of the paint, the office, what the carpet looks like, and you learn as you go. And if you aren't making mistakes along the way and breaking a few eggs, it's hard to assign importance to the real important milestones. And things started to get complex pretty quickly because we did hire people relatively soon. And when you hire people and have teams, I've always referred to this company as Ohana because I'm from Maui originally, and it is like a family. And like any family, I think you take great accountability for the people, that you're raising and that you're around and influencing. And so, as soon as you have teams, you want to make sure you have good practices, healthcare, accounting resources, 401k, tools so they can scale, and that, every event that happens after that next hire is easier for that next person. So I can't say wasn't one thing, but kind of a long series of things that started with the accountability that you get around bringing people on who make a decision to come work with you. So I think I think about that a lot. And I think about that today, like we hire anybody with Lauren, our most recent hire who started a few weeks ago, like I take great accountability in her future. And so that's where I think you start, things get more complicated than just a couple of numbskulls in a 500 square foot room doing search.
The timeline for me in the growth was when we hit $1 million in total billings. I felt that it was sustainable, as you say, for like two knuckleheads and maybe a third knucklehead like Don, right? But the big milestones, we're building the San Francisco office in the mid aughts, 2004, five. And, we had a team of 12 to 15 perm recruiters, and we were really making the name of the brand at the time. And then the start of our business, our contract business with Sully and Darren in around 2010, 2011. And then finally the start of technology in 2017. All these milestones, of course, have fits and starts, as you mentioned, but all were ultimately huge for our growth. And this growth also brought on more risk. And to further, again, what you were saying, as we invested significantly in, leases and technology and healthcare and all the infrastructure that allows a business to thrive, there is increased risk, but you're building an organization that is more than just about the founders. I mean, I think the final stage for us, big milestone was, partnering with our private equity firm, New Heritage. It allowed us to expand and provide even more growth to the firm and our employees. We timed it perfectly with COVID after signing the deal. So it was a little bit challenging, to message this stability to the organization without knowing how the COVID situation would play out. But we seem to have managed that quite well. So been really happy about that. So I guess looking back, Derek, what was the biggest risk we took as a company that paid off?
Starting the consulting practice, it kind of took us from being a permanent search firm with 80 transactions a year, whatever it might be, to literally hundreds and thousands of transactions in the course of any year. Without a doubt, that took us into a whole nother stratosphere of complexity and the risk associated with employing 500 plus people every day on consulting assignments. It's a big deal.
Yeah, that speaks to the investment and risk that comes with it, but it makes it fun too, right? You have to be prepared for that growth and hope it works out, and it did. Partnering with those studs definitely vaulted us to the next level by just monetizing our relationships. What was a key company value we established early on that you think still holds true today?
So yeah, it sounds like this whole conversation isn't partially rehearsed, although we're ripping here and there. But, I thought about this, and even as I think about our core value set that we have today, I don't remember, and I'm sure we didn't do it. Like, we didn't put our foot down and say, these are our core values. Like, this is exactly what it's going to be. And I think in part that actually could be, you could look back and say, that's a bit of a failure. I think we've had a mission statement about what we wanted to be, but in terms of that company value, I think it was just there. We walked out of our previous firm where we talked about building great relationships and having integrity and doing things the right way. So 25 years later, I would say the core principal value that we think started the firm, which is really built around great relationships and doing all the things that make a great relationship great, are as true or more true today probably than they were back then. And our core value set, which I love, which is around great relationships, unwavering integrity, working with fierce determination, a great environment where you have equity, belonging, and inclusion that aren't just words on a paper, and then having fun while doing all that, are really kind of those things. But I think the last really key components to what create great relationships, help them be maintainable for 25 plus years.
I think my favorite is probably integrity. If you're not approaching clients, candidates, and colleagues with an established foundation of honesty and trust, it's difficult to build a rapport and a relationship, frankly. So I think we kind of agree. I just really believe in that pillar. We've strived for these tenets as the framework of our culture as our company grew. And I think that we've succeeded, and I think it'll continue to be the foundation of our organization going forward.
Yeah, do the right thing.
What have been some of the biggest challenges we've faced over the past 2 decades? When I think back, I don't recall anything that was specifically debilitating, but there's a really good chance I probably blocked it from my memory.
Yeah, probably. That's what we do as a defense mechanism or something like that. As I think about the business, and I made reference to this a little bit earlier, I do view this as a work family. And in any work family, if you look over the course of 25 years with your life family, your personal family, there are changing family profiles, changing health and wellness dynamics, the inevitable and totally unfortunate tragedies that occur over a period of 25 years. And whether your family is 5 people, 10 people, 50 people, whatever it might be, we've got 100 plus employees. And so there are things that you can't plan for, can't imagine. And it brought about really incredible pain that makes it hard sometimes to place a value on going to work. And so as I think about some of the things that were like debilitating or biggest challenges, I tend to think about the challenges that some of the people had in our organization, where they've let us into their lives about different challenges that they've had. Some have been absolutely horrific. And I think about some of the big things that impacted the businesses, the big things within our business that I think about way more often, because I think so much of our organization is more than just a company. It's a group of people with people problems.
I think what's interesting when you grow from 2 to 3 to 4 people to, quote unquote, a real company, the reality is that the company takes on a life of its own. And that's kind of what you strive for. But as part of that, you want to make sure that there is a support system there when needed, because these people are to some degree part of your family. And I think it makes me feel good when people rely on us a little bit that way. When a company becomes that big, it can weather uncertainty and issues that come up for individuals, but it's also great for the employees to maintain the strength of the organization because that entity is kind of there for them. It's, again, that's what you do with your family. That's what you do with your friends. And I think it's something that we've fostered and has been a big strength for our organization. How did our roles evolve over the years? What was that transition like for you over the past 5 years?
Well, it's the old adage of, you're working in the business versus working on the business. For many years, I worked in the business as opposed to kind of the things that are beyond just making a placement or making a phone call. That transition was stepping away from doing searches. And it was really hard because it was a huge part of my professional identity. I started recruiting shortly after I turned 24, and I woke up early every day knowing that I was only as good as the next thing I did, specifically related to BD or recruiting candidates or paying attention to what was going on in the market specific to my clients. At some point in time, there was an inverse value in those activities versus the ones that I could apply to the business that would make those around me better. And I can't say that I did that all on my own. I'm sure I was nudged by people around me. But there comes a moment when you realize that as good as you thought you were and as impossible as it is to imagine that your client or your candidate can somehow manage to live without you,
Yeah.
they can. And if you've
Right.
done your job well, then there are people in your organization to make their experiences even more elevated than what they had working with you. And again, to me, that was kind of a difficult thing to admit, a very powerful thing to admit and then do. I know, certainly I'm glad I've done it.
Yeah. The whole concept of building a company that's got a life of its own. I felt the first 10 to 15 years were about building the network and strengthening relationships with both the inside and outside of the organization, with my clients and with our employees. The last 10 years have been about building the enterprise value of the organization. I probably had a little bit easier time getting out of the production side than you did, but I've always been, I think, a little bit closer to kind of the business side. And you've just been really fantastic about, the relationships and the sales generation side. So it was really, I think we kind of evolved into our strengths a little bit and rose all the boats. You want to make it an environment where everybody can succeed. What's one lesson from a major setback that you still carry with you?
I hadn't thought about this one. I do have like some level of regret for one or two different decisions that are a little bit maybe more personal to me than they are even for the business as a whole. I feel like I probably made a compromise or two about people who maybe weren't acting in the best interests of the organization because maybe they were good producers or maybe they were going to help us get out of a tricky market. There are a couple of moments I regret over the 25 years where I didn't probably put my foot down sooner or didn't push putting our feet down sooner to say, no, that needs to stop. Like we need to not do that thing. And it hasn't happened a lot, don't get me wrong, but they stick out because it's
I mean,
counter to who we are.
Yeah, those are a little bit easier to identify in hindsight too. I do think those are a little bit easier to identify when you're thinking back what you could have done better. I certainly have that feeling about some candidate interactions. Did I forget to follow up with somebody? Did I not communicate something correctly? There were some functional things I could have done better as I was getting better at the business and learning how to communicate thoughts and ideas a little bit better. From a company standpoint, yeah, I agree with that. There are certainly things that you look back on, and I think I should have moved on that a little bit sooner, or I didn't move on that at all, and I should have. So it's hindsight, but I think when you look at the success of the organization, you can feel good about what you did as a full work of art.
Think how smart we'll be in 25 years.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we talked a little bit about the past and some of the things that went on and the ideas and thoughts we had as we kind of were meandering through the beginning of the development of the company. But, let's talk a little bit more about the current state and future vision. How would you kind of think about our business today and the industry in general, given that we've gone through so many different cycles?
I think the consensus right now is that we are in a difficult market. And I would not equate it to the recessionary market similar to 2001 or 2008 and 9. I think we're dealing with unique economic conditions. The economics at a macro level there's been big shifts in strategy about how we're going to approach the market, and they're changing the landscape. How is that going to affect us long term? So the best thing we can do is be in a position to execute and take competitive advantage of the changes that are upcoming. That can include AI, which is going to be a big player. And then, what filters down from AI, just like economies were built from the internet, what economies were built from telecommunications back in the day. So what is AI going to develop into? It'll, I think, build a giant economy and be a big part of it. And I think it will stay here in Silicon Valley. And I think we'll see it in other areas of the country, but we are still the center of the funding world. We're in a big academic hub. So I think we're going to see good growth here in the coming years. AI's impact is going to affect everyone, and there's no exception. I think people are going to have to learn how to be a little bit more productive using these tools. But I do think it's going to open up a ton of opportunity for the industry. And the brand that we have now and our people are incredible. So I expect great things from our organization.
If I think about kind of like our business in the industry and think about what we do, where we do what we do, I think, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Whether we're talking about chips or storage or software or SaaS or medtech or now AI, there always seems to be game-changing activity. And it does change, like it changes the foundation of the Bay Area. Maybe not forever, although I think AI probably has a chance to be that kind of forever difference maker. It's funny as I think about the place that we're in today, I feel really good about where we are within the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And I feel pretty excited about, the close of 25 and kind of how we launch into 2026 as well. If you had a crystal ball in front of you, what would success look like in the next 5 years?
I look at timelines, I'm coming probably to the tail end of my career, to be honest. I think I've kind of been transitioning out of the business, but you still keep your foot in there, right? As an advisor and working with our employees and clients. So I guess I've left to some degree, but I don't think I'll ever leave. It's kind of like the mob, but that's okay. Honestly, I'm excited to see how our team builds the organization. There's so much potential. So I think continued growth internally, expanding geographically, and moving into more disciplines in addition to technology has been a huge boon for us.
Yeah. No, I think as I think about like the crystal ball thing, one, I wish I had one. Maybe AI will help. How do we make 2026 better than 2025 for our people? How then do we make that a platform for 2027 to be better than 2026 was for our people? I keep thinking about how do we make next year better for our team so that their experiences here are richer progressively as they get, through longer periods of time that they stay working here. We don't want anybody to go anywhere. So how can we make this place continually better and improving every year? So I'm kind of on the same vein of a crystal ball. What advice would you give your 25-year younger self?
It's okay to take risks as long as you do it with the right people and for the right reasons. And I think I did that knowing what I know now. At the time, I was taking risks because I thought it would be cool to start a business with a friend. But I got lucky because I picked the right person and I did it for the right reason. So if I had to recommend something to my son, for example, I'm like, surround yourself with great people and take appropriate risk. If you surround yourself with the right flock, you're going to fly high. I just made that up. And my God, I hope no one takes that. As with most successes, there is a good amount of luck, and we've certainly had that.
I think it's probably not the greatest recipe manual, or whether it's like, first things first, go find your friend and then start a business. Like,
Right.
Think about some different characteristics other than I like to
Right.
hang out and grab a beer with them.
Right.
Although this worked out very nicely, don't get me wrong.
If people are watching this, they're like, are they still friends? And we're very good friends. We do a ton of stuff together. Our families are close. We're very lucky that way. But man, were we lucky that it did work out. I think it's a testament to your personality. My personality are pretty different, so we kind of match pretty well. But there was a lot of luck that it worked out, and we're super fortunate.
Is there a person that sticks out for you that you're like, oh, I really want to take a moment to thank this
I
person
mean,
or these group of people?
I got to thank Robin, my wife, who's been very supportive. She may have had her doubts, but she didn't say anything. So that's cool. I want to thank our clients who have just believed in our ability to perform. And for us to be a solid business partner, I've become friends with a lot of our clients, and I respect the heck out of them. And I hope to maintain some sort of relationship with them when I'm kind of out of the recruiting world. I definitely want to finally thank our team. Our team is just, we value them because of their commitment, but it's also because they're just great people who support their colleagues and do good in the world. Like, they're better than me.
Yeah, well, corny or not, this doesn't happen without Jen, my wife, so I got to tag on with your acknowledgement with mine. I started off in public accounting, lasted 9 months, transitioned immediately into recruiting, which nobody does, back in 1994. Struggled for a year, like really, really struggled. Finally started doing well and did really well. And then walked in the door and said, honey, I know we've only been married a few years, but I think I'm going to quit this lucrative job I have and risk everything with Mike. What should we have for dinner? And she didn't say stupid, like, what's wrong with
Right.
you? And if she was thinking it, she hit it incredibly well, which is actually not something that Jen does well. She doesn't hide her feelings, but she never wavered once. I think we had to use somebody else's faith in us and strength and conviction in times when we really needed it. And you probably don't realize when you needed it most, but it was always there. And so we wouldn't be here without Jen and Robin. There's no doubt about that. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. We got to close this thing out because people are going to get a little tired of listening to two old guys talk about people getting off their lawn.
We've just had a love fest. I've been lucky to work with you and as a colleague for 25 years. We've hired so many accomplished individuals, and I've worked with so many great clients that have made my work life fun. Even on the toughest days, I will certainly and always be grateful to them.
Awesome. Well, and I hate to call this a conclusion of the conversation because we may be doing this again in 25 years. Who knows? But if I were to properly conclude this conversation, I'd say that it seems really crazy that 25 years went by this fast. And like all things in life, there are moments we won't ever forget and things we wish we could forget and things we can't remember, which is probably truer now for you and I than most. And our journey is consistent with the things that you go through in life. But along the way, we have forged really incredible relationships internally. I've been really fortunate to have awesome people that work here that, have tolerated us and I think really enjoy working with us. Externally, like you talked about with clients, I mean, some of the most amazing clients, companies, and really just people. All of that has provided a place that has changed lives, both in how we've kind of impacted people out in the market. And, for me, I don't want to say most important, but it's really, really important. We see everyone that we work with every day. And, the fact that we've been able to really impact their lives has been awesome. And, it's you and I talking, but I wish there were 90 other people on the call being able to lean in because none of this happens without them.
And to acknowledge our team, we're actually heading to a 25th anniversary retreat up in Canada next week in Banff. And we're super excited about that. And I'm very pumped to see everybody.
It is going to be amazing. Really, really a lot of fun and a great way to say thank you to them and prep for the next 25 years together. And I would absolutely unequivocally get back on this roller coaster and do it all over again, Miguel, with you. So on that note, maybe we work for another conversation like this in a few years.
I look forward to it.
All right, guys, thanks for indulging
Thank you.
our chat. And don't hesitate to reach out and say hello if you have the opportunity. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the DeWinter Difference podcast. If you like this episode, head to DeWinterGroup.com/DeWinter-Difference to catch future episodes and share your thoughts, comments, or suggestions. And make sure to connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. This podcast is produced by the DeWinter Group, the leading recruiting firm in the Bay Area and beyond. We help top companies and people reach their fullest potential through world-class accounting, finance, and technology recruiting services.